Chapter 1. The Witness Who Shouldn't Have Existed. Rain had swallowed the city whole. Neon signs bled red and blue through the downpour, turning every puddle into a watercolor smear. Eliam Voss hurried down the crowded sidewalk, hood pulled tight over his damp hair, bust sketchbook wedged safely in his backpack under his arm. His sneakers squelched with every step, and the cold seeped through his jeans, but none of it mattered. He just wanted to get home, shower, and sleep. The bar district was louder than usual tonight, drunk laughter spilling into the street. Eliam tensed automatically. Crowds were overwhelming on a good day, and tonight wasn't a good day. His latest freelance client had kept him 3 hours longer than promised, demanding revisions he'd never pay for. His shoulders ached from stress. He cast a quick glance at the pulsing glow of the bar signs, then veered into the narrow alley beside them. Faster. Quieter. He'd walked this shortcut 100 times. Rain pattered heavily on his hood, dripping off the frayed edge. His breath came out in small white puffs. He kept one hand on his backpack strap, the other tucked into his pocket for warmth. Halfway through the alley, he paused. Voices. Low, tense, male. He took a step back. Too late. A sharp slice through the night. It was nothing like in movies. Silenced gunshots didn't echo. They punctured the air, cold and precise. Eliam froze. Another muffled sound. A grunt. Something heavy collapsing onto wet pavement. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stumbled back behind the nearest dumpster. His breath trembled in his chest. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't. But terror made him slow, made him crouch, made him instinctively angle his view like he was framing a drawing. Through the crack between dumpster and wall, he saw him. A tall man in a black shirt and gloves stood over a body, rain sliding over his broad shoulders like liquid mercury. His stance was calm, controlled, almost elegant in its brutality. The silenced gun in his hand pointed downward, smoke curling faintly in the humid air. The body twitched once, then went still. Eliam's breath caught in his throat. And then the man turned his head. Gray eyes, cold, sharp, impossible to mistake even in the dim alley, locked directly onto him. The rest of the world vanished. For a stretched, unnatural heartbeat, they stared across the alleyways, rain falling between them like a curtain. Eliam's stomach dropped. His hands went numb. His back pressed harder against the brick wall, as though he could disappear into it. Those gray eyes widened the slightest bit. Surprise? Calculation. And then everything snapped back into motion. The man lifted the gun. Eliam's heart lurched violently. His legs didn't move. He felt his mouth form a shape he didn't recognize until the word tumbled out in a strangled whisper. Please. The gunman wasn't fazed by begging. Eliam could see that. Killing was a habit to him, a reflex. His expression stayed unreadable as he stepped forward, boots splashing in crimson-tinted water. Eliam stumbled backward into full view, hands half raised, hoodie clinging to his trembling frame. Rain dripped off his bangs, tracing cold trails down his cheeks. He didn't recognize the man, but he knew of him. Everyone did. Riskalder, the Merciless king. A walking warning not to cross certain lines in this city. Riss stopped just a few feet away, chest rising slowly beneath soaked fabric. His gaze dragged down Eliam's slight form, too thin, too soft, rain-flushed cheeks and ink-smudged fingers peeking from his sleeves. Something flickered across Riss's face. Not pity, not hesitation. Something darker and more startled, as if he'd found something fragile where he expected only fear. Eliam felt that gaze like a physical touch. His knees nearly buckled. Reese raised the gun a fraction higher, the black barrel aligned with Eliam's forehead. A drop of water ran down Eliam's neck. His breath hitched violently. His heart hammered so hard it hurt. Then, sirens wailed in the distance. Riss's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed, flicking briefly toward the mouth of the alley, and in one sharp motion, he lowered the gun. Eliam blinked. Confusion crashed into him. Before he could speak, Riss stepped close, crowding Eliam back against the wall. One gloved forearm braced beside Eliam's head, blocking escape. The other hand gripped his wrist. Firm, controlled, not quite cruel. The sudden closeness made Eliam gasp. Reese's body radiated heat in the cold rain. His clean, sharp cologne cut through the metallic scent of blood. Eliam felt the vibration of Reese's steady breath near his cheek, his throat. Look at me, Reese ordered, voice low. Iliam's eyes lifted automatically. Big mistake. Up close, Reese was devastatingly intense. Strong jawline, rain-darkened hair plastered to his temples, drops clinging to his eyelashes. Those gray eyes searched Eliam's face like he was committing every line to memory. Eliam's pulse fluttered wildly under that scrutiny. You saw something you shouldn't have, Reese said softly. Ilium swallowed hard. I won't say anything. I swear. Reese's grip tightened just enough to be felt. You're shaking, he murmured. Ilium wasn't sure if it was from cold or terror or something else entirely. I can't help it. The tension in Reese's jaw shifted, as though the admission unsettled him. His gaze dipped briefly to Ilium's parted lips, then snapped away just as quickly. Another siren echoed closer. Reese muttered a sharp curse. You just became my problem. Before Ilium could react, Reese grabbed him by the hood and wrist with controlled force and pulled him down the alley. Ilium stumbled after him, nearly slipping in the puddles. Wait! Wait! Ilium protested breathlessly. Quiet, Reese snapped, unless you want to get shot by someone who won't hesitate. He dragged Ilium to the street, where a sleek black car skidded to a stop. The back door opened before Riss shoved Ilium inside. Ilium hit the seat with a gasp. Riss climbed in after him, the car peeling away with a roar. For a moment everything was noise, rain hitting the windows, tires against asphalt, Ilium's unsteady breathing. He pressed back into the leather seat, drenched, trembling, staring at the man beside him. Riss sat rigidly, gun still in hand, shirt clinging to his powerful frame. A thin scar ran down the side of his throat, disappearing beneath the collar. His hair dripped rainwater onto his shoulders. Ilium's voice came out a shaky whisper. Are you going to kill me later? Reese didn't look at him. You don't need to know my name. You don't need to know anything. That's not what I asked. Reese's jaw flexed. You just need to stay alive and quiet. Ilium flinched. That's not... The car hit a pothole. Ilium pitched forward with a small gasp. Reese moved instantly. His arm wrapped around Ilium's waist, pulling him into the solid heat of his chest to steady him. Ilium's hands landed against Reese's abdomen, fingers brushing taut muscle through wet fabric. His ear pressed against Reese's sternum, catching the deep, firm rhythm of his heartbeat. The world narrowed to breath, warmth, and the faint scent of Reese's skin beneath rain and smoke. For one dizzy moment, Ilium didn't feel afraid, just overwhelmed. Reese stiffened, eyes widening almost imperceptibly. He pushed Ilium gently back into his seat, jaw clenched so tight the muscle jumped. Seatbelt. Ilium fumbled for it with shaking hands. Reese didn't offer help, but he watched him the entire time, chest rising a little too fast. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. The penthouse didn't match the car, or the alley, or any version of Reese that Ilium had imagined. It was too clean, too expensive, too cold. All steel and glass and dark polished wood. A place built for someone who didn't sleep much. Elevator doors slid open to a panoramic view of the storm-shrouded city. Rain streaked down the windows in long, trembling lines. Reese guided Ilium forward with a hand firm on the back of his neck. Not rough, not gentle. Just in control. Ilium felt like his skin was burning everywhere Reese touched. Reese moved through the penthouse with precise efficiency, locking doors, checking windows, flicking lights on. He barked orders over the phone in a low, lethal voice Ilium could feel in his bones. Ilium backed away toward the hallway, pulse frantic. Maybe he could slip out while Reese was distracted. Maybe. He lunged for the door. Reese caught him effortlessly. One strong hand slammed flat against Ilium's chest, pushing him back into the wall with controlled force. Ilium's breath punched out in a whisper. Reese's body pinned him, not crushing, but close enough that Ilium could feel the heat rolling off him. You really want to test me tonight? Reese murmured. Ilium squeezed his eyes shut. I don't want to die. The hand on his chest spread wider, fingers splaying over his sternum. Reese's thumb brushed damp fabric. He could feel Ilium's heart beating fast, too fast. Reese inhaled sharply, as though the rapid rhythm unsettled him. Look at me, he said. Ilium forced his eyes open. Reese's face was inches from his, close enough that Ilium could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the droplets clinging to his lashes, the intensity simmering behind his gray eyes. Close enough to feel breath mingle, warm, uneven, too intimate. Reese's gaze dropped to Ilium's throat, then lower, noting every shiver. His expression darkened, not predatory, but something else, something conflicted. Do you have a phone? He asked quietly. And no. Any tracker? Wire? Ilium shook his head. Reese didn't take his word. His hands searched Ilium with brutal precision, but his touch was never cruel. Fingers slid along Ilium's sides, dipped into pockets, brushed his waist beneath the soaked hoodie. The impersonal search felt intimate in ways it shouldn't have. Ilium shuddered, breath-catching. Reese stilled. Hold still. I'm not doing anything. Ilium whispered, cheeks burning. That's the problem, Reese murmured under his breath, sounding almost frustrated. The words made Ilium's stomach twist. When Riss finally stepped back, Ilium's legs felt unsteady, his face flushed from fear and something dangerously like awareness. "I'm not going to hurt you," Riss said, surprising himself more than Ilium. His voice dropped. "Not if you listen." Ilium's lips parted in shock. Russ looked away quickly as if the promise unnerved him. Later, when the penthouse had quieted and the storm softened outside, Reese returned from another room holding a towel and a folded set of clothes. "Here," he said. "You're freezing." Ilium hesitated, but took them with both hands. His fingers shook too much to unzip his hoodie. Riss watched for a moment, jaw working, then stepped forward. "Hold still," he murmured. Ilium obeyed. Reese's fingers brushed Ilium's throat as he tugged the zipper down. Warm, calloused fingertips ghosted over the pale line of his collarbone. Ilium swallowed hard, throat bobbing beneath Reese's knuckles. Neither spoke. For a moment, the world narrowed to the soft rasp of fabric, the heat in Reese's eyes, the trembling in Ilium's spine. Riss stepped back first. "Guest room," he said softly. "Door stays unlocked. Go." Ilium nodded, clutching the spare clothes to his chest. Later, curled beneath a blanket far too soft for someone like him, Ilium listened to Riss's voice through the thin wall, low, commanding, dangerous. But threaded through that voice, barely noticeable unless you listened for it, was something steadier. Something almost protective. Ilium fell asleep to that sound, torn between terror and something he didn't have a name for. Only one thought circled in his mind, relentless as rain. The man who should have killed him didn't. Chapter 2. A crime lord with a soft spot. Ilium woke to warmth, silence, and the faint smell of coffee. For a moment he couldn't tell where he was. The mattress beneath him felt too soft. The pillow too full, the room too still, too clean, too expensive. No chipped paint, no creaking pipes, no street noise seeping through thin walls. Then the memories hit him in a slow, terrifying rush. The alley, the gun, Riss's hand on his chest, the penthouse's cold gleam. He sat upright, breathing hard. Rain slid quietly down the enormous window across from the bed, soft early morning light filtering through the clouds. Everything looked untouched, polished, immaculate. Too quiet. Ilium ran a shaky hand through his hair. His clothes were still damp from last night. Someone, Reese, had left a folded towel on the small dresser. Ilium swallowed. He dried his face, then stood, pulling the oversized t-shirt Reese had given him over his head more firmly. The cotton was warm from his body heat, hanging loose around his frame. He stepped into the hallway, cautious as a stray cat entering a stranger's home. The penthouse was dim, except for the kitchen, where warm yellow light spilled out. Ilium crept toward it. The soft hiss of a coffee machine reached his ears, the faint scrape of a spatula against a pan, a low curse in a voice deep enough to vibrate the air. Riss. Ilium stopped at the corner, heart pounding, then peeked in. Riss stood at the stove wearing a black long-sleeved shirt rolled up to his elbows. His hair, usually slicked back or perfectly styled, was a chaotic mess, damp in places as if he'd run a hand through it repeatedly. He wasn't wearing the intimidating jacket from yesterday. Just a tired man with broad shoulders, dark circles under his eyes, and a frown aimed at the eggs in the pan. The sight hit Ilium harder than the alley had. Riss Calder, the Merciless king, looked human, and domestic, and weirdly attractive. The coffee machine hissed as it finished brewing. Riss poured 2 mugs, pausing only when Ilium shifted his weight on the tile and made the slightest sound. Riss turned his head sharply. His eyes, gray and piercing, softened by a degree Ilium wouldn't have believed if he weren't seeing it. "You're awake," Riss said quietly. Ilium's throat was dry. "I didn't know where else to go." Riss nodded once, jerked his chin toward the counter stool. "Sit, it wasn't an order." "Not exactly. More like Riss didn't know how to make it softer." Ilium sat. Riss set a steaming mug in front of him. Ilium wrapped both hands around it immediately, chasing the warmth that sank into his cold fingers. Riss leaned against the counter across from him, one hand braced on the marble, mug in the other. He watched Ilium with unreadable intensity. Breakfast was silent except for the soft tap of rain on glass. Ilium sipped his coffee. It was strong but good. Reese watched every movement, eyes flicking over Ilium's face, his hands, the way he clutched the mug for grounding. Ilium couldn't tell if Reese was checking for signs of fear or making sure he was still there. After a long moment, Reese spoke. "There's a price on your head now." Ilium choked on the coffee, coughing. Reese tensed, moving like he might reach out, but stopped himself. "What?" Ilium whispered. Reese's expression hardened. "The man you saw me kill. In the alley. He belonged to another syndicate. They know someone witnessed it. They don't know who, not yet. Ilium's stomach dropped. But if they find out, they won't, Reese cut in. His tone wasn't comforting, but it was confident, deadly certain. Not while you're here. Why? Ilium asked, voice cracking. Why help me at all? You could have just finished it. Reese's jaw tightened. His gaze darkened, shifting away for a moment like he was fighting himself. You're safer with me than anywhere else, he said finally. That's the only reason you're breathing. Ilium held the mug tighter. You keep saying that, he murmured. But you don't act like someone who wants me dead. Riss's eyes met his. Something flickered there. Brief, electric, dangerous. Something Ilium couldn't name but felt in his chest. Riss pushed away from the counter abruptly. Come on, he said roughly. You need dry clothes. The clothes Riss brought actually fit. A soft charcoal Henley and clean sweatpants. They smelled faintly of detergent and something that might be Riss's cologne. Ilium changed in the guest room, feeling strangely exposed even though he was fully dressed. When he emerged, Riss was waiting in the living room, arms crossed. The rain behind him painted his silhouette in muted silver. Better, Riss muttered, eyes scanning Ilium from head to toe. Ilium flushed under the attention. Do you know if my sketchbook? Riss nodded to someone off-screen, and a moment later one of his men approached with the worn sketchbook in hand. For you, Riss said. Ilium lit up, taking it carefully. Thank you. Riss's eyes softened. Just barely. You draw? Yeah, Ilium said shyly. Helps me think. Riss's gaze drifted over Ilium's delicate fingers curled around the sketchbook's spine. Something in his expression tightened. Sit wherever you want, Riss said quietly. I have calls. Ilium settled on the couch by the window, drawing the skyline blurred by rain. His hand steadied with each line. The scratches of graphite filled the silence. At one point, Riss walked past him. Something soft and warm suddenly draped over Ilium's shoulders. He startled. A blanket. Riss didn't meet his eyes. You were shivering, Ilium swallowed. Thank you. Riss's fingers brushed the nape of Ilium's neck as he adjusted the blanket. Ilium felt the touch like fire, like a spark running straight to the center of him. He tried to keep drawing, but the warmth blooming in his chest made his lines less steady. From across the room, Riss watched, quietly, intensely. His gaze lingered on the delicate curve of Ilium's wrist, the way his lips parted slightly when he focused, how his hair fell over his eyes. Riss looked away, only when a knock sounded. Two of Riss's men entered, tension rolling off them in waves. Their voices drifted in from the hallway, low, coarse, careless. Should have put a bullet in him, that's what I'm saying. He's a liability. Just a soft little. I've heard enough. Riss's voice cracked through the air like a whip. The men fell silent instantly. Ilium froze behind the half-open living room door, breath caught in his throat. Riss stepped closer, gray eyes darker than storm clouds. You touch him, Riss said, voice soft in a way that was far more terrifying than shouting, and you lose your hand. The men nodded frantically. Riss dismissed them with a flick of his fingers. When he turned, Ilium was still in the doorway, blanket wrapped tightly around him. His wide, startled eyes met Riss's. You didn't have to defend me, Ilium whispered. Riss's expression softened, fraction by fraction, as he approached. I did, Riss muttered. They forget who gives the orders. He stopped a foot away, close enough for Ilium to feel the gravity of him. Close enough that the warmth of Riss's body pushed back against Ilium's fragile fear. I heard everything, Ilium said softly. I know, Riss replied. Silence hummed between them, thick with something unspoken. Then Riss stepped back abruptly, like he'd gotten too close to a flame. Stay inside, he said quietly. I'll handle the rest. Night settled heavy over the penthouse. Rain still tapped against the glass, but softer now, a quiet lullaby. Ilium tried to sleep. He curled under the blanket Riss had given him, sketchbook placed on the bedside table. But as soon as he drifted, the nightmares came. Gunshots, rain turning red, Riss lifting a gun to his forehead, Riss close, too calm. Ilium gasped awake, body rigid, breath coming in ragged bursts. He clutched the sheets, trembling violently. A soft knock came at the door, then it opened gently. Riss stood there barefoot, shirt unbuttoned at the top, hair mussed from sleep. He looked, unexpectedly human. Worry creased his brow. You cried out, Riss said quietly. Ilium swallowed hard, unable to speak. Riss crossed the room in a few measured steps and sat on the edge of the bed. He hesitated, then rested a large hand carefully on Ilium's shoulder. Ilium flinched. Riss started to pull away, but Ilium leaned to the touch instinctively, breath shaking. Rhys froze. Then slowly his hand relaxed, fingers curving over Ilium's shoulder with steady warmth. "Bad dream?" Rhys asked, voice softened to something almost tender. Ilium nodded, cheeks damp. Rhys brushed damp strands of hair from Ilium's forehead, thumb grazing his temple. The touch was light, careful, as if Ilium were made of something breakable and precious. Ilium's breath caught. His eyes flicked down to Rhys's mouth for half a second before darting away. Rhys saw it. His fingers paused in Ilium's hair, but he said nothing, just shifted closer enough for his breath to warm the back of Ilium's hand resting on the sheets. "You're safe here," Rhys murmured. "They'll go through me first." Ilium felt the words more than he heard them, felt the promise, the danger wrapped in comfort, the intimacy disguised as protection. He lay back slowly, Rhys's hand still resting solid and safe on his shoulder. "Stay, please," Ilium whispered before he could stop himself. Rhys's jaw tightened. "Just until you fall asleep," he said. Ilium nodded, eyes fluttering shut. As he drifted, the last thing he felt was the faint imprint of Rhys's fingers, warm against his skin, lingering long after sleep finally took him. Chapter 3. The closest thing to a choice. Evening draped itself over the penthouse like a heavy velvet curtain, the sky washed in storm-purple shadows, city lights flickering through sheets of rain. Ilium walked quietly down the hall, barefoot. The soft fabric of the Henley Rhys had given him brushing warm against his skin. He wasn't sure what pulled him toward Rhys's office. Maybe the faint sound of his voice, low and controlled, threaded with something harder to identify. He stopped at the half-open door. Rhys stood with his back turned, shoulders taut beneath a black shirt, one hand braced on the desk while the other held his phone to his ear. His tone was sharp, each word clipped like a blade skimming glass. "You have 48 hours to hand over the witness," a voice crackled through the phone, loud enough that Ilium heard it clearly. Ilium's breath froze. The phone call ended abruptly. Rhys slammed the device onto the desk with a force that made the wood rattle. He exhaled sharply, jaw tight, head bowing just slightly like he was gathering himself. That was when he noticed Ilium. Rhys's entire body stilled. Ilium stood in the doorway, face pale, fingers curling into the doorframe as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. Rhys cursed softly under his breath. "Ilium? What did he mean?" Ilium whispered. 48 hours for what?" His voice trembled. He hated it, but the fear crawled up his throat and refused to be swallowed down. Rhys straightened slowly, shoulders rising and falling in a controlled breath. His eyes were dark as storm clouds, shadowed with something Ilium didn't understand. "You weren't supposed to hear that," Rhys said quietly. "I heard it anyway." Ilium took a shaky step inside. "I want the truth." Rhys pressed his lips together. For a long moment he didn't speak, then, "They know about you." Ilium felt the words physically, like someone had dipped a hand into his chest and clenched tight. "Someone found evidence a witness was there when I killed their man. They're pushing every contact, every alley, every rat in the city. They want proof you're dead." Ilium's knees buckled. He staggered back, catching himself on the bookshelf. His breath came too fast, too shallow. His hands shook uncontrollably. "No," he whispered. "No. No, this can't be." Rhys moved before he finished speaking. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Ilium by the waist just before he crumpled to the ground. Ilium fell forward into the warmth of Rhys's chest, fingers clutching at the front of his shirt like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. "It's okay," Rhys murmured, voice unexpectedly rough with urgency. "Breathe. Ilium, breathe." Ilium pressed his forehead into the solid muscle beneath the thin fabric, breathing in ragged gasps that tasted like panic and rain and Rhys's cologne. Rhys's arm circled his back, palm flattening between his shoulder blades, steady and grounding. "Look at me," Rhys said softly. Ilium forced his head up. Gray eyes met his, stormy, intense, and filled with an emotion that punched the breath out of him. Fear. But not for Rhys. For him. "They won't touch you," Rhys said. "Not while I'm alive." Ilium swallowed hard, fingers still curled tight in Rhys's shirt. He didn't know if the trembling in his limbs was fear or something else. Something reckless and warm and impossible to admit out loud. Rhys's hand slid slowly down to his waist, firm enough to steady him, but gentle enough not to frighten. "You're not alone," Rhys murmured. "Not anymore." Ilium closed his eyes for a second, letting the words settle in his bones like heat. Hours later, the storm outside had grown darker, but inside the penthouse, pockets of warm lamplight softened the cold edges of the place. Rhys sat on the living room couch, exhaustion pulling at the corners of his eyes. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, hair mussed in a way that made him look more human than he ever had. Ilium hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "You can sit," Rhys said without looking up. There was no command in his voice this time, just weary invitation. Ilium walked over, settling on the opposite end of the couch. A respectful few feet separated them, but the warmth emanating from Rhys's body crept across the space anyway. "Was it always like this?" Ilium asked quietly. "This life?" Rhys didn't answer immediately. His eyes traced the skyline, rain streaking like ink across the glass. "I grew up in this city," he said at last, "on its worst streets. I learned early that you either own power or you get crushed by it. I wasn't going to let anyone break me. Not again." Ilium watched him, chest tightening. "So you built an empire?" Rhys let out a soft, humorless breath. "Piece by bloody piece." "And you don't regret it?" Rhys's lips pressed into a thin line. His jaw flexed. "I didn't, until now." Ilium's breath caught. "Because of me?" Rhys turned his head slightly, eyes meeting Ilium's in the dim light. Something raw flickered there. "Caring about someone is a weakness," Rhys said quietly, "and if they know I care about you, they'll use it." The words hit Ilium harder than anything else that night. He didn't realize he'd moved until his knees brushed Rhys's. Neither of them pulled back. Ilium's fingers, small, tentative, lifted to touch the hem of Rhys's sleeve, curling around the fabric. Rhys stilled, gaze dropping to the delicate contact. His pulse jumped faintly at his throat. "I've never had anyone fight for me, not like you have." Rhys's jaw clenched. His hand twitched, as if resisting the urge to reach for Ilium. He didn't resist long. Slowly, almost painfully, Rhys let his fingers drift toward Ilium's, hovering just close enough that their knuckles brushed. Heat shot straight through Ilium's chest. Later that night, thunder shook the penthouse. A violent bolt of lightning lit the sky, casting blue shadows across the floor. Ilium yelped softly at the sudden crack of thunder. Rhys was on his feet instantly. "Ilium?" Ilium stood near the hallway, hand pressed to his racing heart. That one was close. Rhys crossed the space between them, hand sliding to Ilium's lower back before he realized he was doing it. He kept his palm there, warm and steady. "You're all right," Rhys murmured. "Just a storm." The lights flickered, then went out. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the penthouse in dim, eerie blue. Ilium's breath caught. Shadows stretched long across the floor. The storm rumbled like a living thing. "I can't see much," Ilium whispered. Rhys's hand drifted lower, fingers spreading across the small of his back. "Stay close." Another thunderclap cracked the sky open. Ilium reached blindly and found Rhys's hand. He squeezed. Rhys froze. Then, with a low exhale, he laced their fingers together. His thumb stroked a slow, soothing circle over Ilium's knuckles before he could stop himself. "Rhys," Ilium breathed. "Someone's downstairs." A loud crash echoed up from below. Rhys reacted instantly, pulling Ilium into the wall with gentle force. His forearm braced beside Ilium's head, creating a protective cage around him. His other hand clamped firmly at Ilium's waist. Ilium gasped softly as Rhys's chest pressed against him, breath brushing the shell of his ear. Heat radiated from him, overwhelming in the cold darkness. "Stay behind me," Rhys whispered, voice low and lethal. Ilium's heartbeat thudded against Rhys's chest. He could feel Rhys breathing, steady, controlled, grounding. Another crack from downstairs. Rhys went still. Then, he exhaled. "It's just the security sensor." A branch hit the panel. The tension eased, slightly, but Rhys didn't move, not right away. They stayed tangled in that charged, breathless closeness for one suspended heartbeat too many. Rhys's fingers remained curled around Ilium's waist. Ilium's free hand pressed lightly against Rhys's chest, feeling the strong, slow thud beneath his palm. When Rhys finally stepped back, his fingers dragged faintly down Ilium's side, leaving a trail of heat. Ilium's breath trembled. Rhys's jaw flexed. "Come on, let's sit." The living room was illuminated only by the city's glow, rain streaking the window like silver veins. Rhys draped a blanket over the couch, sitting down with a tension that looked almost painful. Ilium joined him, closer than before, but still with a small, respectful gap between them. Wind howled against the glass. "Tell me something real," Ilium said softly into the dimness. "Something about you." Rhys's eyes found his. Ilium took a shaky breath. "I told you last night about my nightmares." Russ hesitated, then nodded once. "I don't sleep much," Russ admitted. "Haven't since I was a kid. Too many memories, too many knives in the dark." Ilium's heart tightened painfully. "And you still protect people?" Ilium asked. Rhys let out a breath. I protect what's mine. Ilium's breath caught at the way he said it. The blanket slipped off Ilium's shoulder. Rhys reached over without thinking, pulling it back up. His fingers brushed Ilium's neck, warm and careful. Ilium shivered. I was always invisible growing up, Ilium confessed quietly, staring at his hands. My parents didn't care about art or me. I was just a quiet inconvenience. Rhys's voice dipped low. You are impossible to ignore. Ilium's eyes lifted. Rhys reached out, slow as a tide, fingers brushing Ilium's lower lip where he'd been chewing it. The touch was feather light. But Ilium's breath hitched, his eyes fluttering half-closed. Rhys's hand slid to cup his jaw, thumb grazing the corner of his mouth. Ilium leaned into the touch without meaning to, breath mingling with Rhys's. Ross leaned in. Closer. Closer. Ilium's eyes shut fully, heart racing, lips parted. A sharp crackle from Rhys's phone cut through the moment. Rhys froze, the spell shattered. He pulled back sharply, swearing under his breath as he checked the message. Movement from the rival syndicate, too many signs to ignore. Ilium touched his own lips, pulse frantic, breath shallow, because he realized something terrifyingly simple. He had wanted that kiss. Badly. And Rhys had wanted it too. Chapter 4. I can't protect you if I can't touch you. The sky outside the penthouse had turned a bruised shade of orange and gray, the kind of late-afternoon light that felt heavy and tense. Rhys was already on edge. Too many threats, too many shifting pieces, too many rivals sniffing around his territory. He had barely slept. His shirt hung unbuttoned halfway as he strode down the hall, phone still in his hand, jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked along his cheek. A frantic knock came at the door. One of his men stood there, looking jumpy. Boss, we saw the kid near the locked stairwell. Looked like he was trying to. Rhys didn't let him finish. His blood went cold, then hot. He didn't even respond. He just moved. Fast. The door to Ilium's room burst open, the sound sharp enough to make Ilium drop the pencil he had been using. His sketchbook slid across the bedspread, landing open on a half-finished drawing of the skyline. But Ilium spun toward the doorway, startled. Rhys! Rhys was already there. Still half-buttoning his shirt, hair slightly mussed from running a hand through it too many times, eyes blazing like a storm. He closed the distance in 3 long strides and pressed his palm flat against the door beside Ilium's head, caging him in without touching him but close enough to feel the heat rolling off him. Were you trying to run? Rhys demanded, voice a low, rough growl from somewhere deep in his chest. Ilium's mouth opened in shock. What? No, I wasn't. Don't lie to me. Rhys's other hand planted itself on the other side of Ilium's head. He boxed him in completely, breath falling hot against Ilium's cheek. You were at the stairwell. Why? Ilium's throat tightened. His eyes stung instantly. I was looking for better light, Rhys. To sketch, that's all. But Rhys was too furious to hear the quiver in his voice, the hurt trembling beneath the words. Ilium pressed back against the door as tears pooled, unbidden, in his eyes. I wasn't trying to leave. Rhys inhaled sharply, catching the shimmer of tears just as one slipped down Ilium's cheek. And everything inside him snapped. He stepped back immediately, hands lowering, shoulders dropping, expression twisting into something like self-disgust. Ilium? Rhys's voice softened, shaking almost imperceptibly. Talk to me. Don't cry. I didn't mean to scare you. But Ilium had been scared. Not of Rhys hurting him. He knew Rhys wouldn't. But of disappointing him. Of the idea Rhys thought he wanted to run. Ilium wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, breath unsteady. I wasn't running, he repeated, voice breaking. I wasn't. Rhys swallowed hard. Then tell me why you were there. Ilium took a shaky breath and grabbed the sketchbook from the bed, then shoved it into Rhys's hands. Here, he choked. Look. Rhys blinked, thrown. He flipped it open. The first few pages showed the stairwell. Dim lighting, shadows falling across the railing, angle studies for a composition. The next page was the view from that spot. The windows, the strip of sky, the architectural lines. But then, Rhys froze. Sketch after sketch, of him. Rhys cooking in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up. Rhys's profile lit by lamplight. Rhys's mouth softened into an expression he'd never seen on himself. Rhys's hands around a mug. Rhys standing near the window, half in shadow. Dozens of moments Ilium had captured quietly, intimately, without Rhys noticing. Ilium stood trembling in front of him. I wasn't trying to leave, he said, voice cracking. If I wanted to run, I would have. I stayed because I feel safe with you, you idiot. Rhys's world stopped moving. The air between them thickened, charged, every breath louder than the storm outside. Ilium pressed a fist to his mouth, shoulders shaking. I didn't want to lose the light, that's all. I just wanted a place to draw. He sank onto the edge of the bed, head bowed, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. Rhys moved, slowly this time, cautiously, as if approaching something delicate. He sat beside Ilium, the mattress dipping under his weight. His hand hovered above Ilium's back for a long moment before finally settling, warm and broad, rubbing slow circles that eased the tension in Ilium's spine. I thought you'd leave the first chance you got, Rhys admitted, voice low, rough, vulnerable in a way Ilium had never heard. I was jealous of a stairwell. Ilium let out a tiny, wet laugh. You're so stupid. Rhys exhaled, something between amusement and resignation. Yeah, he murmured, I know. Silence settled over them, thick but warm, wounded but healing. Ilium wiped his eyes and turned toward him. Rhys was already watching him. Ilium's breath hitched. The daylight slanted into the room, catching Rhys's features, shadows cutting along his jaw, light threading through his dark hair. His shirt hung open at the collar, revealing the strong line of his neck. His eyes were softer now, but still intense enough to make Ilium's heart stutter. I didn't want to leave you, Ilium said again, more quietly this time. More honest. Rhys closed his eyes for half a second, as if the words physically hit him. When he opened them, something raw flickered beneath the control. He reached up, both hands cupping Ilium's face. His thumbs brushed away the last of the tears. You should want to, Rhys whispered. I'm not a good man. Ilium leaned into his touch, breath trembling. You are to me. Rhys made a sound, small, strangled, desperate, and leaned his forehead against Ilium's, breaths mingling. Ilium's hands fisted in Rhys's shirt, pulling him closer. Rhys's voice came out rough. Tell me to stop. Ilium's voice came out barely a breath. Don't stop. Rhys kissed him. Slow at first, tentative, cautious, as if he were touching something forbidden. Ilium melted instantly, lips molding to Rhys's, breath catching at the warmth and weight and want in the kiss. Rhys kissed like a man who had held himself back for too long. Slow, savoring, reverent. Then Ilium responded in full, fingers sliding up into Rhys's hair, and the kiss deepened. Rhys groaned softly, the sound vibrating through Ilium's bones. One hand slid down to cradle the back of Ilium's neck, thumb brushing sensitive skin. The other drifted toward Ilium's waist. Ilium tugged him closer, needing more. They stumbled backward onto the bed, Rhys pinning Ilium gently beneath him before bracing his weight so he didn't crush him. Ilium arched up into him, lips searching, breathless. Rhys's hands slid under the hem of Ilium's shirt. Fingertips brushed warm skin. Ilium gasped softly into Rhys's mouth, back arching. Rhys growled, a low sound of need he didn't mean to let out, and kissed Ilium harder. Then he pulled back just enough to sit up against the headboard, gripping Ilium's waist and guiding him easily, almost instinctively, onto his lap. Ilium straddled him, thighs bracketing Rhys's hips, breath shaking. His hands rested on Rhys's shoulders. Rhys's hands settled on Ilium's hips, warm and grounding. Ilium's cheeks were flushed, eyes bright. Rhys's lips trailed down his jaw, then to his neck, lingering at the pulse point, breathing him in like he needed the scent to live. Ilium's fingers curled in Rhys's hair, a soft sound escaping him as their bodies pressed together, fully clothed but unbearably heated. Rhys's hands slid beneath Ilium's shirt again, palms spreading across the small of his back. Ilium gasped, thighs tightening around Rhys's hips. Rhys's voice shook against Ilium's skin. If we keep going, I won't be able to stop thinking about you that way. Ilium bent his head, lips brushing Rhys's ear. You already do. Rhys exhaled sharply, grip tightening. He kissed Ilium again, slow, deep, consuming. And Ilium responded with everything he had. But after a long, dizzy stretch of heat and breathlessness, Rhys forced himself to slow. His lips trailed up to Ilium's cheek, then his temple, then his shoulder. His forehead pressed into the curve of Ilium's neck, breathing steady but ragged. I want our first time to be yours to choose, he murmured against Ilium's skin. Not because you're scared. Not because you think you owe me. Not because you feel trapped. Ilium's arms wrapped around him, holding him close, heart full and aching. He had never been protected like this. Never been wanted like this. Never been touched like this. Gentle and hungry and reverent all at once. Ilium's voice was barely a whisper, shaky with emotion. I'm not scared of you, Rhys. Not anymore. Rhys tightened his arms around him, pulling Ilium closer into his lap, into his chest, into the steady warmth of him. It was the closest thing to a choice Ilium had ever made. Chapter 5. He was supposed to kill me, not save me. The sky outside the penthouse was still black when Reese slipped into his jacket, fastening the shoulder holster beneath it with practiced efficiency. It was barely 4 in the morning. The city below was quiet. Rain paused in the eerie calm before dawn. Eliam stirred on the couch, half asleep with his sketchbook open beside him. He'd insisted on keeping Reese in his line of sight the night before, refusing to go to bed until Riss was done with his calls. Riss secretly hadn't minded. "I'll be gone an hour," Riss murmured, pausing in the doorway. Eliam blinked awake. "A meeting?" "A contact," Rice said. "Someone who owes me favors, might help negotiate a pause in the search." Eliam sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Will you be careful?" Riss went still at the question, at the concern that softened Eliam's voice. "I always am," he said quietly. But when he left, locking the door behind him, something gnawed uneasily at his spine. He just didn't know why. The betrayal came 15 minutes later. Eliam was sitting cross-legged on the large living room carpet, sketchbook balanced on his knee, headphones loosely around his neck. He was drawing the silhouette of Riss's jacket, the way it looked draped carelessly over the couch. It felt comforting, like Riss was still here. Then, a click near the stairwell. The sound was subtle, but Eliam's hand froze mid-line. The penthouse was silent this early. Riss's men didn't come inside unless called. Eliam lifted his head. Footsteps, heavy, unfamiliar. He stood, slow and quiet, clutching the sketchbook like a shield. "Riss?" he called softly. No answer. He backed toward the hallway, but a shadow appeared behind him. A rough hand clamped over his mouth, a bottle pressed against his nose and mouth, cold and chemical. Eliam twisted, panic exploding in his chest. His sketchbook fell, pages fanning open on the floor. He stomped down hard, elbowed the man holding him, but the cloth was already over his face. A voice hissed in his ear. "Got you, pretty little liability." His vision blurred. The room spun. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was Riss's jacket on the couch, and he thought, desperately, "I almost had a life here." Riss knew something was wrong the second he stepped into the penthouse. The air felt off. Too still. Too quiet. He dropped his keys. "Eliam," he called, walking deeper inside. No answer. Then he saw it. Eliam's sketchbook on the floor, open, a page ripped from the binding. Eliam's pencil lay snapped beside it. Something inside Reese's chest ruptured. He crouched, picking up the sketchbook with trembling fingers. Turning the page, he saw a half-finished drawing of his jacket. His throat tightened. And then, he noticed the faint scuff marks on the polished floor leading toward the stairwell. Riss stood slowly. When he turned, his men flinched. His eyes were wild, not furious, not cold, fairly desperate. "Who unlocked that door?" he asked softly, dangerously softly. No one answered. So he grabbed the nearest man, slammed him against the wall, and pressed a knife to his collarbone. "Try again." A choked voice cracked. Lucas opened it. He said you gave permission. He said the kid was going to be moved." Riss's vision went blood red. He found Lucas cowering near the elevator, trying to hide the bloody knuckles that told Riss he'd struggled with someone. Riss didn't hesitate. One hand closed around Lucas's throat. With the other, Riss pressed the edge of a blade to his cheek. "Where is he?" Lucas tried to smirk. "Even if I tell you." Blade cut deeper. "Where?" Riss growled, voice savage and shaking. "Is he?" "Solvik's warehouse, District 9. Please, please." Riss released him, only to punch him so hard the man collapsed, wheezing. He turned to his second in command. "If I don't come back," Riss said, voice deadly calm, "burn everything. But if he's still alive, you get him out first." "Boss." Riss's voice dropped to a whisper lined with steel. "He's the priority." And then Riss was gone. Eliam woke to a harsh overhead light, the cold bite of metal against his wrists. His arms were tied behind him, body secured to a chair with rope that scraped his skin raw. His head throbbed from the chloroform. His vision swam. The warehouse was vast, echoing. Shadows sat thick in the corners. The smell of oil and dust clogged the air. A man crouched in front of him, a rival boss Eliam vaguely recognized from the news. "You're the Merciless King's little weakness," he said with a grin. "Didn't think he had one." Eliam's stomach clenched. "Shh, he'll come." "Oh, I hope so," the man replied. "Because I want him to watch you die before he tries to kill me." Eliam's breath shook. Another man stepped behind him, fingers curling in his hair, yanking his head back. Eliam winced. "We'll carve a message into him through you." A gunshot cracked the air. The man holding Eliam jerked, then dropped, blood spraying across the floor. Everyone froze. Another gunshot. Another guard collapsed. The boss spun just as the warehouse door burst open with a metallic bang. Gone. Rhys walked in like a storm given flesh. His silhouette cut through the haze. Broad shoulders, gun steady in one hand, blood splatter already marking his cheek. His eyes were wild, burning. He fired again. A guard dropped. Another tried to rush him. Rhys moved like smoke, like inevitability. A knife flashed, a throat opened, a body fell. Eliam flinched at every sound, but he couldn't look away. Rhys wasn't just fighting. He was destroying. Not out of business. Not out of strategy. Out of pure, unhinged fear for Ilium. When the last man crumpled to the ground, silence fell heavy. Rhys didn't breathe. Didn't hesitate. He ran to Ilium. His hands trembled as he cut the ropes, fingers fumbling with the knots like he didn't trust himself not to break Ilium by touching him. The moment Ilium was free, he collapsed forward. Rhys caught him instantly, arms wrapping around him, crushing him to his chest. Ilium sobbed silently against him, clutching Rhys's shirt with desperate fingers. "I've got you," Rhys whispered, voice cracking. "I've got you. I've got you." He said it over and over, as if trying to convince himself Ilium was truly in his arms again. Rhys pressed his lips to Ilium's temple, soft, frantic. Ilium's body shook. Rhys carried him out, holding him like something precious and breakable. The car ride was too quiet. Ilium sat pressed against Rhys's side, wrapped in Rhys's jacket. His hands fisted in the fabric at Rhys's chest, refusing to let go. "You could have traded me," Ilium whispered. "You could have given me up." Rhys's jaw clenched. "I'd rather die." Ilium swallowed, throat tightening painfully. Back in the penthouse, Rhys carried him to the bedroom, setting him gently on the bed. His hands scanned for injuries, wrists, shoulders, jaw. With such tenderness, Ilium could barely breathe. "Ilium," Rhys murmured, cupping his face. "Tell me where it hurts." "Here," Ilium whispered, placing his hand over Rhys's. "It hurt when you left." Rhys went still. "You were supposed to kill me that night," Ilium said softly. "But you didn't." Rhys's voice shook. "I think that night is when I started living." Ilium felt tears prick his eyes. Rhys swallowed hard. "If you want to disappear, start a new life, I'll make it happen. I'll protect you from afar. I'll never force you to stay." Ilium stepped closer until their chests touched. "Well, you're my normal now," he whispered. Rhys's breath hitched. Then Ilium kissed him first. The kiss was slow, achingly so, Ilium's hand sliding up Rhys's shirt, gripping the fabric, pulling him closer. Rhys kissed him back with reverence and hunger, one hand cradling Ilium's neck, the other wrapping around his waist. They stumbled onto the bed, half laughing, half breathless. Rhys's weight pressed into Ilium, solid, warm, safe. Clothes tugged loose, soft gasps. Hands tracing skin beneath fabric. Rhys's fingers explored Ilium's waist and back, always careful, always pausing when Ilium made a sound, checking, asking without words. Ilium's hands pressed against Rhys's skin, feeling muscles jump under his touch. His breath stuttered as Rhys's lips trailed along his jaw, down to his neck. "Tell me," Rhys murmured against his skin, "if this is too much." Ilium whispered, trembling, "More." Rhys groaned softly and leaned over him. Foreheads touching, their joined hands squeezed between their bodies. "You're mine now," Rhys whispered, "and I protect what's mine." The world faded to soft lamplight and tangled silhouettes. Morning came quietly. Sunlight spilled through the windows, turning the penthouse gold. The storm had finally passed. Ilium padded into the kitchen wearing one of Rhys's shirts, too big, hanging off one shoulder. Rhys stood by the stove in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, glaring at a pan of misshapen pancakes. Ilium laughed softly. Rhys turned, and the sight of Ilium, sleep-warm, smiling shyly, made something inside him break and mend all at once. Ilium walked up behind him and wrapped his arms around Rhys's torso, cheek pressed between his shoulder blades. Rhys covered Ilium's hands on his chest, thumb stroking slow circles over his knuckles. "We could leave the city," Rhys said quietly. "Find somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." "With you?" Ilium murmured. "Always." Ilium smiled into Rhys's back. Later, as Rhys cooked more aggressively than necessary, Ilium sat at the small dining table, sketchbook open. He sketched Rhys shirtless at the stove, sunlight catching the faint scars on his arms, the curve of his spine, the softness of his expression when he thought Ilium wasn't looking. And Ilium realized, with quiet, steady certainty, that the man who should have killed him had become the one person who chose him. And he chose Rhys right back.